I would like to welcome our in-person attendees, as well as those on Zoom, to the second grant writing and workshop hosted by the Research Enterprise and Outreach Office within the School of Education and Human Development. My name is Dr. Corey Douglas, and I'm a Research Development Officer in the REO. I would also like to introduce the other Research Development Officers that are here today, Ann Savell and Dr. Kesha Henry. Especially Kesha has been integral in organizing these workshops that we put on last couple weeks ago and this week. I'd also like to recognize Donna Rosenkrantz, who is helping organize as well and got the breakfast this morning. So that was very, very important, at least for the in-person attendees. Our office hosted a workshop a couple of weeks ago focusing on submitting grants to the NIH. And today's workshop will focus on submitting proposals to the Department of Education. For our Zoom attendees, we will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions or need clarification, please communicate through that chat feature. We are excited to introduce Lucy Deckard from Academic Research Funding Strategies. She has over 20 years of experience in proposal and grant writing. She has worked with faculty across the country and helped craft proposals to many federal agencies, as well as private foundations. We're excited to have her speak with you today about submitting grants to the Department of Education. And with that, I will let Lucy take over. Let me get the Zoom set back up.
While we're setting up, I'm going to give out pens and flash drives to anybody who hasn't gotten one. So here we go. The flash drives have all the slides on them. Has everybody else gotten one? Yes, Jeremiah. Yes. That way, if I decide to get out of PowerPoint and go on slide. All right, thank you everybody for joining me. As Corey said, we're talking today about the Department of Education. And I'll first go through a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So everybody who is here in person should have a flash drive. And on that drive are all the slides I'm presenting today. The important thing about that is that there are a number of links on the slides, because with any federal agency, just knowing where to find information can be really daunting. I see people nodding their heads, right? And so I'm trying, I have a lot of links to help kind of direct you to where to find specific information and resources. So obviously you need the PowerPoint to do that. For those of you online, this is the link right here. And I'm sorry if you could put that in the chat for them. That if you click on that, that will take you to a Dropbox where you can download all the slides, as well as other materials that might be helpful that are on the flash drive. So this is just a link to my academic research funding strategies. So I actually used to work at Texas A&M until 2010, and then started my own consulting business. And so this is just more information about us. The thing that probably you would be interested in knowing is that we work with faculty, across the country. So as part of that, we kind of see a lot of proposals go in. We see a lot of reviews come back. We work with a lot of early career faculty who's just learning how to write grants. And as a result, you start to see patterns of kind of what works, what doesn't, mistakes that are really easy to make, and and things that you want to make sure you do. So that's what I want to share with you today in the context of the Department of Education. The most important thing here on this slide is just my email address. So if later on you wish you had asked, a question, feel free to email me. I'm always happy to answer questions. Okay, so first what we're going to do is kind of talk in a big picture. So this is not just about writing your grants, but it's all the things you need to do in order to understand the Department of Education, figure out where you should be applying, understand what they're looking for that particular funding opportunity, plan your project, and then write your proposal. And then we'll also have a panel of people who've been really successful to answer your questions. So trying to kind of go soup to nuts. for Department of Education. Now, that said, there is a lot of variety in the kinds of research everybody is doing, the kind of projects you have in mind. So all of this needs to be filtered through your particular discipline, your particular research area. And that's where getting mentors, people who've been successful, talking to them, have them read your proposals, give you feedback. All of that will help you to, kind of address what the expectations are for your specific topic and your particular funding. So I just want to give that caveat that probably anything I say here is an exception. And you always check with people with research office, with your mentors and colleagues. Those are all really important resources. And how do you frame a project for your particular topic and your particular? So before I get started, though, I did want to kind of do a little polling here. How many people do we have online? 13 people. Okay, so what I'd like to know is how many of you, welcome, how many of you have actually written a grant proposal at all? Okay. How many of you have one? Okay, wonderful. How many of you have reviewed? Okay, now let's talk about Department of Education. How many of you have written a proposal with Department of Education? Okay, so we have at least one person. How many of you have reviewed? And if you reviewed with Department of Education, has anybody won a grant? Ah, okay, wonderful. All right, so I'll be coming back to you. So, I'd like this to be a conversation. I don't want to stand up here and talk. So hopefully you will feel free to share your experiences, to share, any lessons learned, particularly if you've been successful. And, obviously talk about, your specific questions related to your area. Now, those of you online, if you could put in the chat for Corey, just put in, you've submitted to the Department of Education, and if you want a grant, or if you can kind of make note of kind of where we are in terms of the level of familiarity. All right, so I am going to back up and talk at very basic level for anybody who really doesn't know anything about Department of Education, and then we'll go forward. So those of you who already know some of this, no, is it not loud enough? I wonder if it's being picked up by the, if it is where, oh, so is it on, you guys can hear all right? Oh, so they can't hear me. Oh, we've got to get something technical out of the way, technical problem, right? Sounds muffled. Let's see. If I talk like this, is that better? Let's see if it's a question of the microphone or if I'm not even. Okay, so I need to move it. I'll move it up. All right. Oh, okay. Yep, it's a science to know where to put that microphone. Okay. Yeah, thank you for letting me know. And if if it becomes muffled again, let me know. All right. So let me close this window so you can see this. All right. Okay. And let me need to hide these. Okay, so let's back up and talk about the big picture. What's this again? Okay, so kind of thinking about, you have a project in mind, you have a line of scholarship, a line of research that you want to pursue, right? There are a number of, funders for, to fund education research. So US Department of Education, we're going to talk about them today, but I just want to point out there are other places. So as we go through this and you think, hey, this project I have in mind, it just doesn't seem like it really fits Department of Education. Remember, there are a number of other education funders out there. So if you're looking at STEM research, our STEM education, then, and that Science Foundation has a lot. You're looking more at education. The Science Foundation has funding for that. And they also fund the really fundamental stuff like cognitive neuroscience, psychology, all that kind of stuff. Okay. And then NIH, which we had a workshop a couple of weeks ago, they also fund really fundamental learning and cognitive research, understanding the brain, how does it work. That's not really something Department of Education does, right? So again, you have to find the right funder that's interested in funding what you do, and that's part of your process of positioning yourself to be competitive. Okay? And then there are a number of mission agencies that fund more workforce development and training. So, particularly with the CHIPS and Science Act, for the training technicians, semiconductors, all that kind of stuff. You'll find that Department of Defense, NOAA, NASA, all of them have some kind of workforce development kinds of grants. So again, that's not something necessarily that Department of Education funds. So you got to find the right project and fit it to, or you've got to find the right funder to fit it to the project you have in mind. And then there are also state and private funders. So you have the state education or Texas Education Agency. Some of that is coming down from the Department of Education, federal funds that go to the state education agencies across the country and then go to, to grantees. Okay. And then there are a number of private foundations. So Spencer, Kellogg, Bill and Melinda Gates, Russell Sage. The thing about these private foundations, though, is you have to, kind of filter your research ideas through whatever their mission is, right? So Kellogg Foundation has a very specific mission related to equity and racial relations and disparities and so forth. So if even though they will fund some education project, it has to fit within that, their priorities and their mission. So you always, when you're looking at private foundations, make sure you understand what they are really trying to do, because they tend to be pretty narrow in what they want to fund. It has to fit within whatever their focus is for the time being, and it can change. So what Bill and Melinda Gates funded 10 years ago is not what they fund now. So you have to do your research. And again, working with your research office that can help you with that. The development office can help you with that. And then, of course, there are professional associations. They fund more usually fellowships, grants for dissertation grants for early career faculty, that kind of thing. Another thing to consider when you're, kind of looking at funders is what kind of project are you thinking about? Okay, so are you thinking about really fundamental research where you are trying to understand what is happening, what are the underlying mechanisms? So how is learning happening? What is your brain doing? Or, those kinds of things, looking at gaps in knowledge and trying to fill them, okay? That's one type of research. Then you have more applied research where you are trying to improve learning in some aspect, and develop an intervention to improve some aspect of learning, that kind of thing, where you have to get, kind of get evidence about how well it's working. You have to, kind of talk about what your targets are, how you're going to evaluate that. That's kind of more applied research. And then on top of that, you have kind of more programmatic grants. So these are the kinds of grants where you are not really doing research in this case. You are more, getting resources to support a need. So, for example, you need funding to take students on a study abroad project, or you need funding to support students, give scholarships to students who are studying in particular areas, with topic areas that are in areas of national. Okay, those are really not research, but they are still funded by Department of Education and funded by other agencies. But they're specific parts of an agency and specific programs that are interested in funding these kinds of projects that won't want to fund these and then won't want to fund, so you have to, again, be really clear in your own mind what kind of project you have in mind, and then look to see if you're looking at a particular funder and a funding agency or funding opportunity, do those all align? Is what I'm doing really fitting what they want to do? Now, this is, kind of an artificial division. Really, it's a spectrum. A lot of times, how fundamental is fundamental, could be at the molecular level, could be at the neuron level, could be at the individual level, could be, it's educational psychology versus, neuroscience, right? So it can vary, but again, kind of just be aware of that when you're thinking about what kind of project you want to propose and then looking for the right funding opportunity that fits that. Yeah. They're still having problems? I wonder, is it because, let me step away. Now, if I step away, I'm wondering if they're actually hearing it through here. It's on. Let's put to my belt. Yeah. Okay, so let me see. When I'm far away, do they hear me? Do they hear me right now? I'm wondering if it's actually getting the microphone. If there's that much. Oh, okay, and there's not a microphone on the computer that is picking. Yeah, the actual. Okay. It's about the same when I step away. Okay. Yeah, let me try this. Okay, what if I do this? Can you ask them how that? Okay. Okay, I'll just hold it this way here for now. It's lighter than holding it. Okay. And then, of course, thinking about the topics that you're thinking about. Are you thinking about research in STEM education? Are you thinking about research in humanities education, researching on reading? All those, a lot of times, will dictate which funding opportunities will fit what you're doing. Also, the population. Are you thinking about pre-K, K-12, undergrad, graduate school, adult, informal education, special education? All of those are also, kind of going to help you kind of hone in on which funding opportunities you're going to be wanting to apply to, because usually they are organized kind of based on that. Also think about what the outcome is going to be. So is the outcome going to be a journal article? Is the outcome going to be a new intervention? Is the outcome going to be an outreach activity? Is it going to be a policy recommendation? Different funders and different funding opportunities will be interested in those different outcomes. So again, that's another thing you can check. You know what you want to do, then look to see which funding opportunities fit that. Another thing to think about is how far along you are in your idea. Okay, so are you just at the exploratory phase? Are you kind of, I have an idea, I'm dipping my toe in the water, I want to just see, I think this might work better. I think I have some ideas about what, certain factors that might be affecting learning that other people haven't looked at, or ways that you can, malleable factors that I can address that in certain ways. That's exploratory, and those are a specific kind of grant. Okay, and we will talk more about all this when we talk about Department of Education. But that is not necessarily something you can be competitive with if you are applying to a funder that's expecting a more developed idea. Okay, so again, you have to kind of be clear-eyed. Where am I in the process, and then is that particular funding opportunity aligned with that? Are they willing to consider something that's kind of that exploratory phase? Okay. Do you have hypotheses that you are already want to test? Are you developing an intervention, or maybe you're scaling up or evaluating an intervention, you're replicating it and looking at how well the replication works. All of those are going to be different kinds of funding opportunities. So again, this is part of your thinking through your project, and then being really aware of what characteristics are of the project you want to get funded, and then looking for that. All right, so how many of you have a project in mind that you want to apply for funding for? And it's fine if you don't. If you're, kind of early in the process, you're thinking, more about, I want to learn about grant writing, that's totally fine. But just so I know where people are. All right, so we're going to talk about Department of Education. Okay, so that was the big picture. Just to let you know, there are other fish in the sea. If when I talk about what they fund, it doesn't fit what you have in mind. But here we're going to talk about Department of Education. Okay, so the first rule of pursuing grant funding is you've got to get to know your funder. Okay, and that is especially true with any federal agency, and these agencies are huge. And so it's really important to not only get to know the funder, but get to know the different parts of that agency, because they really vary a whole lot. They're almost like totally different organizations in what they fund, what their missions are, what their, kind of what their processes are. All of that is different. So I'm going to try to kind of give you a bunch of, at least snapshots of different parts of the Department of Education. Okay. All right, for US Department of Education, they have 3 kinds of grants. And this again can be a little bit confusing for big federal agencies, because a lot of times they fund research like what you do, but they fund all this other stuff too. And it can be hard to kind of sift through all the other stuff and find the stuff that you actually want to apply for. People on their website, it can be really difficult. So just so you know, okay, they fund student loans and grants, they fund formula grants. So formula grants are grants that there is a formula that Congress says you give so much, such a percentage of your budget to these various states and so forth. Okay, those are not what you're interested in. What you're interested in is discretionary grants. So when you're looking at a funding opportunity, one of the first things is look, is it a discretionary? Okay, so what are discretionary grants? These are grants that are awarded using a competitive process and peer review. That's what you would be expecting, right? So this is what we're going to focus on here. But a lot of times, if you're just looking on big websites, there we go. There we go. Okay. All right. So I'm going to keep talking. Okay. Now I'm going to move this here. Okay. All right. So if you're looking at a website, you can a lot of times find all this other stuff, and it can be a little confusing. So again, look for those discretionary grants. Okay.
There's only 50 buttons.
Well, thanks to the Zoom people. Oh, okay. Thanks to the Zoom people for letting us know. If we do keep getting feedback, what do we adjust down here? Okay. 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 Sure. Get rid of this real quick. Sorry, I'm just going to get rid of this control panel. This blocking thing. Here we go. All right. Okay, so I said you were going to have a ton of links in this presentation, just again because it can be so daunting to find the right information in this huge agency. So you have the funding opportunities for forecasts. So this is telling you this is what's coming up. This is really can be very helpful. Okay, and again, some of these are like everything. So you're going to have to look for those discretionary grants that you're interested in and sift through all this other stuff. Okay, then you have posted opportunities on grants.gov. So grants.gov has every federal funding opportunity on it, but this link will take you to the ones for Department of Education. Okay. Federal Register, that is where you will see, kind of the official announcement of a specific funding opportunity. And so you can look up those Federal Register notices at this link. Okay. Open education competitions with links to the application. That's on the Department of Education website. And then you can look at, we're going to talk a lot about the Institute for Education Sciences today, and I'll give you more links for them because they fund a lot of education research. So that's very likely going to be one of your focuses. for funding. And so their funding, that's a link for that. And then this is the link for all Department of Education programs. So this is kind of, if you want to look, cast a really broad net, look across all of the Department of Education, these are links that would be helpful to you. Hold on. Okay, so this is just the organization of the Department of Education. Okay, and I know you probably can't see this in the back of the room, but this is just to show there are a whole lot of different offices. And again, each office is very different in what it funds, in its processes, even how you would write a proposal, how they evaluate proposals. It's all different. Okay, so you've got to figure out which one you are looking at and then get to know that office. So you've got the Institute of Education Sciences. So that's the research arm. They fund education research, a whole lot of education research. That's their focus. And that's why we're going to talk more about them. But there are also other offices that do fund some research and those programmatic grants also that we were talking about, where you just need resources to do something that's not necessarily research. You will find that. And even some that are kind of more on the very applied side. Okay. So you have the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, Office of English Language Acquisition, Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, Office of Post-Secondary Education, Technical and Adult Education. So all of these are, different places. And again, each one is very different in what it funds. And you can go to their actual website and get to know more about each office. Okay, so this is an expanded org chart again, just to show you all the different, once you say, okay, I am really interested in, let's say I'm really interested in the post-secondary education. Well, they've got policy planning and innovation, they've got higher education programs, they've got international and foreign language. So within each of those, you got to figure out which one you fit and then get to know that one. So again, this is the challenge of federal agencies. They're huge, and you have to really kind of dig down to your part of, whichever part that you want to focus on of that agency and get to know that part. All right, to help you do that, okay, this is the link to the operating structure offices. So it shows you all the offices. And then if you go there, you can find these various offices and then click on those and then go to their webpage, then find out what they're funding, what their priorities are, what's coming up. A lot of times they'll tell you news, hey, we're going to be funding this, or hey, we just closed the competition. All of that is part of getting to know your specific part of the funder and being able to anticipate what are they going to want to fund in the future. So even if you see, oh, well, there was an opportunity, maybe it, closed in September, does it come around every year? Does it come out every couple times, every 2 years? All of that will help you then anticipate, okay, I'm not ready now, or I missed it, but I can prepare for next year when they're going to have that competition again. So for example, one of these is Office of Post-Secondary Education. So many faculty end up applying there. And again, they tend to fund a lot of more programmatic grants, okay? So they administer programs that address critical national needs in support of post-secondary education. They have the higher education programs, and then within that, they've got institutional service, and then they have student service, which includes TREO and FIPSI, which are specific kinds of grants, mainly for disadvantaged students. So all of that again, and you can start to kind of dig down and find out, okay, this is where I'm interested in applying. And then they have the international and foreign language education. So that's a whole nother part of that particular part, the office within the Department of Education. So I want to just give you an example of the kind of funding opportunity you might find in some of these types of offices that are not, these are more programmatic, not so much, research focused, just in case you run up against these, because they are very different from what we're going to talk about later when we're talking about research proposals. So this example is the Fulbright-Hays Group Projects Abroad, okay? So you can then click on the link and it will take you to the Federal Register where they actually announce the funding opportunity, And then you can go and find more information on their website about it. Okay. This is on grants.gov. If you look it up, it's okay. It shows you, okay, this was posted January 2023. The deadline is already passed. But this, if you go through and you look at related documents, you can find all more information. You can download the instructions for how to write this grant. It will take you, I think, to the Federal Aid Register, which is where they have all the detailed instructions. So when you look at that, it's really detailed. Okay, so it goes through and it says, okay, we want this, we want that, we want this, we want that. Very prescriptive. Okay, and so they will tell you, okay, you have 40 pages, but it's double spaced. And they will go through and give you all the instructions for font, all that sort of stuff. And then they will also tell you how they're going to score it. Okay, so they say, okay, plan of operation, 20 points. Quality of key personnel, 10 points. The budget and cost effectiveness, evaluation plan, adequacy of resources, potential impact. If you go through and look at that, right, that is telling you exactly what your reviewer is going to have to be evaluating you on. Yes?
How does that compare to
it's much more prescriptive, right? So if you're used to writing a regular research proposal, which we will talk about, even Institute of Education Sciences, which is part of Department of Education, very different, right? They don't give you points for this, points for that. They'll rate you like 1 to 7 on various review criteria, but it's really very different than this this is again, much more structured. A lot of these kinds of proposals, you will find, and I can't say that for this particular program, for some other programs, you make a 98 out of 100, you get funded, 97, you don't get funded. It's really in the, kind of in the weeds in terms of making sure you address everything they're asking for. And even if you say it in one section, they're required to evaluate you under each of these criteria independently. So make sure you address it in the section that they're asking for it, right? Even if you said it earlier, right? So this is a very different kind. And again, it sort of makes sense. This is not about research. This is about getting funding to take students abroad who may do research, but it is really about, how are you going to actually make this work, right? So it's just a very different kind of proposal. So I just want to emphasize that I know this is all, this workshop is really about research proposals, but I just want to emphasize that if you are writing one of these more programmatic proposals, that it's a lot more structured. It's a lot more just going by you have to make sure you understand what the expectations are, obviously, your plan of operation. What are they looking for? And they will give you more information there. You can look at other people's proposals that have been funded. You can talk to people. Usually there's a big community of people who've already been funded, and you kind of find out what best practices are for things like preparing your students to go abroad. What have they done in the past? What seems to work well? What doesn't? You need to know those things, but it's really much more on the logistics, right, than describing what your research questions are, right? So it's just a different type of proposal. Yeah. Say it again, journal paper reviews are. Well, they do. So they actually have training for the reviewers. Usually you'll have like 3 peer reviewers who might be running this. Sometimes they'll even have people who are not, who are part of the agency will be part of that. But usually it's maybe 3 to 5 peer reviewers. They will be told, this is how you need to evaluate that. They get training. There are other materials, like how do you evaluate plan of operation? And it's also in the application, they tell you more about what they're looking for in each of those. But, and they have to not only give you the points, but they also then have to describe why. They have to write up why. Now, not to say there won't be variations, right? They then just, meet as a panel and discuss it and come up with what their final ratings are. But they're trying their best to try to have consistency, but obviously people are going to have different opinions. And what can happen is, say you have 3 people at home reading your proposal, going through, giving you your your ratings, and then they get together and they talk, and then somebody changes their mind, and they can do that, right? They, after talking to the other person on the panel, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Or this wasn't clear to me. And then someone says, oh no, you know, he says it here, right? So there is that conversation that happens too, to try to make sure that everybody is sort of aligned on, but people will have different opinions, and that can happen. Okay. So this one, you know, this particular program, it was 100, this is, you know, from a few years ago, I think this particular one, but it's 105 points is the possibility. And you know, a lot of times, like I said, it's a game of just a few points between getting funded or not getting funded. And then this is the more information about the plan of operation. They tell you, describe how the objectives of the project are related to the purposes of this program. In the project design, which generally consists of 3 phases: pre-departure, overseas phase, and post-travel. Then describe how you're going to, you know, what you're going to do in each of those phases. So if they give you a lot of detail, and you know, I think a common mistake people make is they don't actually read this stuff, right? It is a big, you know, like, can be a long document. It can be easy for you to kind of get swept up in your own, you know, what you want to do. Just keep going back to what they're asking for. If it is a call that is really prescriptive like that, it's, you know, they're telling you this stuff for a reason. And your reviewers are being told to evaluate you based on these things. So make it easy for them to see. Okay, one question is, how will the management plan effectively link all project phases? Okay, well, say, you know, we will link all project phases by doing X, Y, Z. That makes it easy on the reviewer. They can find that, right? So make it easy for them to find how you're addressing each review criterion. And then as they're trying to come up with how many points should I give this person in this section, they, you know, it's much easier for them to say, oh no, she did full points on this, full points on that, full points on that. Okay, and then these are just more examples here. Okay, so just again, that's a very different kind of proposal than what we're going to talk about the rest of this time, because now we're going to talk more about research. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Has anybody worked on any of these kind of more programmatic grants where you're trying to get money for scholarships, money for travel, money for things like that? Yeah. So what was your experience with that? Yeah, I think that is really, and you know, it seems like a no-brainer, but it's very easy to kind of get off on your own, because you know, you have your idea. Okay, we're going to take all these kids to Italy and to, you know, to France, and we're going to be exploring this particular aspect, and you start to get all involved in that, and you want to write a really nice. A lot of times, people want to write a nice flowing narrative. You don't want to do that. You want to go step by step, and even if you said it in one place, say it again if they're going to be looking for it in a different section. Yeah. Every item is title it and then answer it, and then title it and answer it, so they know exactly how to do it. And we've done some for our own project where we've had to teach them to make it, and I'm like, where do they get to this question? Where do they? Because they don't know what to do. Exactly. So for those online who may not have heard what she was saying, it's like, don't try to write a novel. State, okay, this is the requirement, this is how we're answering it. This is the requirement, this is how we're answering it. So again, remember the whole process of being evaluated is this poor reviewer, which could be you at some point. I'm afraid I'm about to get feedback. That they, you know, they're sitting there with a sheet, right? They got to give you a number of points for this. They got to, and they're being told, okay, look for this, look for that. And if it's all some nice, you know, kind of narrative, you know, discussion of the importance of art in Renaissance times and how these students are going to learn all that sort of stuff, and it's not addressing the things they're requiring, they're not going to give you full points, right? And that's going to hurt you. So make it easy for that reviewer. Remember, this is very different than somebody reading your journal article or reading a book. Okay. Anybody else have anything, any experience they want to talk about? as I said, a lot of this for those kinds of grants, those are very much a game of a few points a lot of times, right? You have to get almost all the points because others will, right? So it's a question of just being really rigorous and disciplined, and also thinking through your project, right? You have to have a strong answers to these questions that they're asking you. How are you going to manage this? How are you going to manage that? But also when you're writing, you have to make sure it's easy for your reviewer to find those things. Okay, we're going to shift gears now, and let's talk about research funding, okay? And the Institute for Education Research, okay, IES, or it's Education Sciences, I don't know why I said Education Research Sciences. It is the research arm of the Department of Education, okay? Their mission is to provide rigorous and relevant evidence on which to ground education practice and policy, and to share information broadly. So identify what works, what doesn't, and why. Improve educational outcomes for all students, particularly those at risk of failure. So in general, we're talking kind of about formal education, right? Because that's the focus of the Department of Education, okay? They want to fund rigorous education research, statistics, and evaluation to provide reliable information about education. Okay, so that's their kind of broad mission, what they, their remit, what they've been told to do. So this is something always to remember when you're writing proposals for IES. It's all about rigor, right? There's all, your ideas, all that stuff is important, but remember, they really want rigor. And so a lot of times there's a real emphasis on how you're gathering information, how you're analyzing your statistical methods, your samples, all that sort of stuff is a big concern. And so as you're thinking about your project, you really want to keep that in mind. Okay, so IES is organized around, basically they have the National Center for Special Education Research, the National Center for Education Research, the National Center for Education and Evaluation and Regional Assistance, National Center for Education Statistics. So these are the two organizations that fund most external funders, right? External researchers, okay, with grants, okay? So National Center for Education Research and the National Center for Special Education Research. So what you will find is if your project could apply to special education, but it also could apply in general, then you probably need to apply for the regular one, right? The Special Education Research Center really is focusing on things that would not otherwise, be relevant, that are only relevant to special education or that are uniquely relevant to special education. So that is their focus. They're really going to focus in on that. Okay. So they support projects to examine the state of education in the US, develop and evaluate innovative approaches to improving education outcomes, understand characteristics of high quality teaching and how to better train teachers and support them, okay, and recruit them, understand classroom, school, and other social contextual factors. And you actually start to see too now in the most recent funding opportunities, they're also really concerned about the, kind of the impacts of the pandemic. So you'll see that kind of is starting to kind of get in there too. Okay. So the education and special education research programs, they have a number of grants with funding opportunities. They have transformative research in education sciences, research training programs, statistical and research methodology in education, partnerships and collaborations focused on problems or practice or policy, national research and development centers and special education research and development centers, research networks. So these are all kind of funding programs, right? Research grants focused on systemic applications, longitudinal data to support state education policy making, low cost, short duration evaluation of education, special education interventions, research grants focused on NAEP process data for learners with disabilities, research to accelerate pandemic recovery. So that in special education, so you can see that kind of getting in there, improving pandemic recovery in education agencies. Okay, so all of that, if you go to this link, you can find all this whole list, right? And then within that, you can go in and say, okay, looks like maybe this is where I fit, right? And then you can click on that And then you can find the funding opportunities and what's going on in that particular part. So again, it's sort of a Russian dolls, right? We were talking about Department of Education is huge. But within that, you have all these offices. Now and then you have the IES. Within that, you've got all these different programs. And then within that, you've got to look for specific funding opportunities. All right, so education research grants, okay, are for improving education outcome from early childhood through adult education, okay? So that's through the Center for Education Research. Special education research grants are focused on expanding the knowledge base and understanding of infants, toddlers, children, and youth with or at risk of disability. So you can see the age ranges are a little different for those different offices. And then you've got the institutional research training programs. So they have education research and special education research for postdoctoral, predoctoral, postdoctoral, and so forth. So they will fund people at the predoctoral phase, people at the postdoctoral phase, and so forth. So again, if you're a student, that might be something you look at. Okay. And education research and development centers, and then statistics and research methodology. Okay, so if that's your expertise. They have one for people who are early in their careers, and then they have a regular one. All right, and this is, again, here's the application guide for these, and then this is the funding page. All right, so these funding opportunities, where you see them, you'll find them on this page that I was pointing to, but when you actually are trying to find all the information to apply, these are usually announced in the Federal Register. And then you have details in the request for application that you can get from the IES website, and then you can find them on grants.gov. Okay, so the National Center for Education Research, they administer 13 education research programs. So these are called topics a lot of times. Okay, these are the topics that they administer, but they don't fund them all every year. Okay, so each year a request for application, so it's a solicitation saying, hey, we would like to see grants. It gets issued by this National Center for Education Research, okay? And they'll ask for a letter of intent, but it's not required. It's just so they know kind of what to expect, right? Usually sometime in the summer, and then they will have a due date. Now, this is a little late, September 21st. Usually it's a little earlier than that, but sometime in the late summer, early fall will be the due date, okay? And every year you can count on that. That RFA is going to come out and you can apply. And you can apply to whichever of these programs, these topic areas that they're funding that year. This last one that it just finished, the proposals were due September 21st, did not fund all of these things. Right? They funded some of these topics and not all of them. Okay. So that is something sort of a wild card. I think it just has to do with the budget they get from Congress, which, Congress is a huge wild card these days. So, you can't be confident always that every single one is going to be funded, but most of them are funded each year. Okay. And then I'll show you on your flash drive or on the link, and the RFA the deadline just passed is on there. So we're going to look at that more, because this is sort of this is the way you can put in your idea. This is not prescriptive. It's just you apply to a particular topic, and we'll talk in a lot more detail about how to do that. But you're with your idea that fits what they want to fund, which is pretty broad. Okay, so it's almost like if you were at the NIH workshop, we talked about investigator-initiated proposals, where you're not being told what to propose. It's kind of open to you. This is sort of their mechanism for that, right? Within these topics. So education technology, education leadership, literacy, STEM education, social, emotional, and behavioral context for academic learning, and so forth. For the National Center for Special Education Research, the similar thing. They have an RFA, comes out every year, same time, same thing, and usually letters of intent are due in the summer. The proposals are due late summer, early fall. Okay, and then they have their topics. Okay, so cognition and student learning and special ed, early intervention, early learning and special ed, and so forth. These seem to be, at least in my experience, a little more consistent with, each are, but the RFA will tell you which ones they're funding every year. All right, and then there are all these lots of resources. So if you say, okay, I want to put in a proposal to National Center for Education, to the the STEM learning focus area, there's all this information. Okay, so they have the research funding webinars that that are just recorded, so you can look for the ones that are relevant to your funding opportunity. They have more information on the training grant programs if you want to apply for those. They have you can look at what has already been funded out of a particular program. You can look and see if somebody at Texas A&M has been funded, and then maybe you can go talk to them. Okay, and that's using this link here. You can sign up for emails and notices of funding announcements, and that can help you kind of again start to kind of get to know what's going on with your part of IES. More resources, things like, how do you estimate cost of an intervention, right? How do you estimate, how do you collect and analyze certain types of data? And then the application guide gives you all the nitty-gritty of fonts that you can use, and what the margin size is and all that stuff. Does anybody have any questions on all that? We're going to go in and look at an RFA in a little bit and kind of and get into more detail. But I want to kind of give you the framework. Yes. In the RFA, when it comes in, the RFA comes out, it's huge, and it will tell you each topic, and it will tell you what they're looking for in that topic, and then you can see whether that and whichever ones are funded are going to be in that topic. Yeah. So it comes out with the RFA, which usually comes out in late, like late spring. Yeah, and there are some that you can pretty much count that it's been funded every year forever, and there's some that come and go a little more, so you can sometimes get a feel for, well, can I expect they're going to fund literacy? They're going to fund, right? So some of the other stuff they don't always fund.
Excuse me, what was the question?
Yeah, and in case the people on Zoom aren't hearing this, so the office is saying they are watching this every day. They'll let everybody know when these RFAs come out, because and I think it's also tied, because the budget process for Congress has been so screwed up for so long. If they don't know what their budget is, they don't know what they can fund, right? So I think it's not necessarily always because of the agency, but also because of the chaos, and the budgeting process, the federal budgeting process. So if we end up with a shutdown and all, and continuing resolutions, all that sort of stuff, then you can probably expect there's going to be some weirdness about when those RFAs are going to come out. Because, they don't want to, hold a competition and not have money to fund you, right? That would be pretty heartbreaking for everybody. So they're a little bit conservative on that. And then remember too, there was a link to sign up for news things. I get stuff in my inbox every day from IES, right? And some of it's not stuff I necessarily I'm not interested in, but it will, if you do, they will let you know when those new RFAs come out. You'll get it in your inbox, so that can be helpful if you're looking for one. All right, so when you're looking at these, these funding opportunities, particularly the ones for the RFAs we were talking about, though, where they have, kind of a big blanket RFA from Center for Education, Center for Special Education. They have they kind of divide it by types of projects, okay? And these are sort of, really you kind of tend to naturally be sort of basic versus applied, ideal conditions versus routine practice, exploration versus scale up. It's sort of, and then they divide them into types of projects sort of based on those spectra. And I'll talk more about that, but that's what I was talking about earlier on when you're thinking about your project. Where are you in the spectrum? Are you at the really fundamental area? And also, are you at the very beginning, kind of the exploratory phase? Or are you farther down? You're looking at an intervention, trying to improve it. Have you already done some stuff on it, right? Or are you trying to scale up something that's already been done and is shown to be effective, but you want to make it broader, you want to replicate it, and you want to see how well to do that? Those are very, again, going to be different kinds of projects, and they're categorized in the RFA, in the solicitation, according to these kind of different categories. And they give you different amounts of money. You write a different kind of proposal for each one. And so we're going to talk more about that. Okay. So when you look at the RFAs for these, kind of, again, sort of investigator initiated sort of a mechanism that we're talking about, they have the types of projects right now are called measurement, exploration, development and innovation, and impact. Impact was called something else before, and now they changed it. So you can see you have to decide which one you want to apply to. Are you applying for a measurement one? You get 4 years up to 2 million. Exploration, 4 years, 1.7 million. Development and innovation, 4 years, 2 million. Impact, 5 years, 4 million. And we'll step through what each of these are. The big thing here is if you get it wrong and you apply, for example, to development and innovation, and they say, no, actually, you're really at the exploration phase, or a lot of your project is all about developing, what your instrument to measure, to assess this intervention. That's really measurement. Then you're done, right? If you apply to the wrong one, then so you really want to make sure that you know which category your project fits into, and sometimes you have to kind of tweak it a little to make it fit. Okay. So let's go through those. Okay, so measurement is research, and this is all in the RFA. So I'll have you look at this on your own in a minute in the exercise and look at and see if you can figure out where you might fit for the project you have in mind. So research to develop, refine, and or validate new or modified measurement instruments for assessment of individual learners, education systems, or educators. Okay. So you have to talk about what the assessment is, the purpose, population, and context for the intervention that you're intending to measure, and it should result in information about the validity of the instrument and information about the cost. So this is something you're going to see a lot, and this has been a trend over the last decade, really, that there's more and more emphasis on cost. So they don't want to spend a bunch of money having somebody develop a new intervention, new program, right? And then it's too expensive to actually be feasible, right? So they really do emphasize cost, and that means you have to understand how do you estimate the cost of implementing something. Okay, exploration. So we were stepping through the different types of projects. Okay, so they're called goals. Don't ask me why, but that's what the Department of Education calls them. They're called goals. So one goal is measurement. This one's exploration. So exploration is, again, on the left side of those arrows we were talking about. So examine relationships between educator, school, and policy level characteristics and meaningful education outcomes, including factors that influence this relationship. Okay, so again, this is exploring those factors, coming up with hypotheses, okay, and about how this understanding can help you to then modify some of the, or modulate those relationships and impact those relationships to improve learner, educator, and system outcomes. Okay, so you can see, again, it's very much on the fundamental side here. Okay, this is intended to inform the development of intervention. Okay, so hey, we are realizing that this particular factor is really affecting, learning. Now that we know that, right, or the way these, various factors intersect might be something now, and we have some hypotheses how we might then, change those, so make these, affect, malleable factors, what they call them, right? Things that you can change or can impact in order to improve learning. And then based on that, somebody can then develop an intervention. This is not about developing the intervention. It's about that fundamental understanding what's going on in terms of those factors, okay? So if you get, again, people tend to be very married to their project idea, right? And they say, oh yeah, that is exploration. I'm exploring this idea for an intervention. I want, this fits what I want to do. And then they apply and they say, and then, you're actually not fitting. So again, you have to really look at what they're telling you and make sure you apply to the right goal. Okay. All right, development and intervention. Innovation. So if you do have an idea for an intervention, might be where you fit. Okay. So that's development and pilot testing of new or modified educational interventions. And they will call them programs, practices, and policies now. So they used to call them interventions, but everywhere in this RFA, they don't say interventions, they say programs, policies. That's a mouthful, and policy. To improve learner outcomes in educational settings, okay? And you should, you need to clearly specify what the core components and implement and what the implementation support will be for this new intervention, program, practice, or policy, right? Get pilot data that speaks to the intervention's promise, and analyze cost of implementing it if it were fully developed. Okay, so again, coming back to cost. Okay. Now, one big thing here is they want most of the funds to support development. Okay, so be careful about letting too much of it. So, for example, if you need to develop an instrument to assess the effectiveness of the intervention, and it's more than 30% of the budget, then they'll say, no, that's a measurement one, right? So again, you have to make sure you understand what their rules are. And then the last one is impact. Okay, that was just renamed in the last RFA. Okay, what's called, does anybody remember what it was called? I've forgotten already. It had a different name. So you'll find that a lot in these funding opportunities year after year. They will pretty much have the same program, but they'll rename them. I don't know why, just differences in thinking maybe from different administrators who are coming in or whatever, right? So you'll see a lot of times things that seem like it's a big change is actually just a change in the name or the term they're using, okay? So impact projects, those grants support causal studies to assess the near and or long-term impacts of programs, practices, or policies. So these are not developing the policies, but analyzing the impact on learner education outcomes, okay? You can do initial efficacy studies and replication studies, okay? But you have to have this intervention, or again, program, practice, policy must already be fully developed. So again, if you say, hey, I want you apply here as into this goal with maybe developing the or finishing developing it, then that's a problem, right? It should go in the development goal. Okay, so you need to. Oh, actually, this is the one where you can't propose more than 6 months to develop and validate the assessment. All right, so let me show you here. Let's go to, this is on your flash drive, or for those of you on Zoom, this is in the Dropbox link, which is in your chat, okay? So everybody should see that link, okay? Actually, maybe, let's see if that works for me. All right, so here are the RFAs, okay? So I'm just gonna take as an example, the National Center for Education Research, okay? And what you'll see is this huge document here, okay? And what it will do is it tells you all the topics that it's funding. This is the one from LAT that just finished up the deadline. Okay, so they're funding career and technical education, civics education, social studies, cognition, student learning, early learning programs, improving education systems, literacy, policies, practices, and programs to support English learners, post-secondary and adult education, STEM education, social, emotional, and behavioral context, teaching, teachers, and education workforce. So for each of these topics, you have program officers, right? And they have their own kind of information about what they want to fund and kind of what their thinking is on that topic. And you have a whole history of people who've been funded out of that particular topic. That's sort of what you want to get to know in terms of understanding your funder, is really honing in on which of these topics fit if you're applying to this one, right? So really get to know, okay, I think I want to apply to social, emotional, and behavioral context for teaching and learning. Now you want to look and see what do they fund, and then you can go down here and you will find a lot more information, including the name of the program officer, which is really important. Okay, here they're describing much more information on the project types. Okay, you're not sure which project types you fit into. Okay, much more information here. All right, so here is where, for example, this one is career and technical education, program officer, Corrine Alfeld, the phone number and email address. The purpose is, okay, research on implementation effects of CTE programs and policies. It goes on and on, okay? Then it tells you kind of what kind of research we would love to see in pretty general terms. Then it'll go into more detail about what specifically they want to see in a proposal in all the various sections, which will, when we talk about rating your proposal, this is where they will give you all kinds of information based on what they're looking for, okay? And so that's really important for you. But also, one big thing that's really helpful is this link that they're giving you, because that takes you to more information on that particular topic and that program, okay? So let's say I just kind of scroll down to cognition and student learning. Okay, so that takes me back to their website. Okay, that's the RFA that we just looked at. Okay, this is the program officer. They have information looking at grantees. You can search, by the investigator. You can search by goals. You can look at see what has been funded. There's more information here about the history and background. More information about other funding opportunities that might be kind of linked or related to this topic. So all of this is part of, again, getting to know your specific kind of part of IES. Is this the right place for you? If you think it is, then look and see who else has been funded. Has anybody at Texas A&M been funded? Is there anybody that you happen to know maybe you went to grad school with, or you're a former advisor? Maybe it's somebody not at Texas A&M. Talk to them, then figure out your project, which we'll talk about next, how to kind of plan your project, and then actually talk to the program officer. A lot of these program officers will actually even be willing to look at a draft of your proposal. So they are super helpful. They're not at all involved in the review process. So that really frees them up to give you all kinds of advice, okay? So this is, again, all the stuff that you need to do before you start rating. It will help you understand your audience, who is reviewing for you, what are they looking for, what kind of arguments do you need to make, what information do they need, okay? And big mistake is sometimes not to do that kind of background research. Yes. That's a really good point. In fact, I think I saw just recently that they would have some virtual office hours right now, even. So yeah, and they also, they're giving, you have all these webinars, other things too. Sometimes that might be helpful. Yeah.
So I turned my microphone on, so I think they can hear me on Zoom. We hear this a lot with all the different trainings we go to and the groups we're in. When you're contacting program officer, they will give you the phone number and the email. Every program officer we ever talk to says email me. They do not say call me. Cold calls are not appreciated because they don't know anything about you, about the project you're proposing, something like that. It definitely helps if you want to contact them to have at least half a page or something, a page of here's what I'm planning. Email them, give them a chance to look at it. You know, what do you think? Does it fit in your program? Things like that, as opposed to just cold call on a Tuesday. That's not something that's encouraged. So just want to reiterate that because every program officer we talk to says the exact same thing. NSF, NIH, doesn't matter, DoD.
Just out of curiosity, so if they office.
That would probably be fun that way. I just saw it. I'm trying to remember where I saw they went out, whether I got it in my inbox. We'll talk next about planning your project development, an outline, and as Corey said, right? I want to make sure we'll go to half a page describing your project so that you actually can have a really productive conversation rather than like a really vague discussion of what you want to do, because then you're just going to get very vague answers.
And then, yeah, you definitely want to, if you can talk to them in person on a phone, that's good, but you want to schedule that, right? Because sometimes they can tell you things over the phone that they won't be able to write in an email. Because once you write it down, it becomes official. So, you know, yeah, they can talk to you about things. And this is true of lots of federal agencies across the board. They can talk to you about things a lot more freely than they're willing to put something written down in an email. So, but just all good advice.
Oh, maybe other people are talking. So I'll repeat what Corey was saying, that, you know, you do want to try to have a one-on-one conversation with the local officer because they are more. And particularly if you ask them to respond to questions like now, you know, I know how it is when somebody emails you and asks you a bunch of questions. Short answers, really, you know, kind of expound in detail because it's a lot of work and you don't know where it's going. So, take it. All right. Okay, so now I actually have an exercise for you. So the you on slide have that link. Look at the RFA for Education Center, RFA for the Special Education Center, and look through that. Look at the topics and find which one it is. Okay, look to identify your program officer, your email address, and then we can use that little tool to do what is that top. Yeah, little abstracts. Right? That's really helpful. Watch that. Okay. So, does anybody have any questions before I? All right, I'm gonna 10 minutes to go through and identify where your home might be. Don't have that. You don't have a computer. You have your phone. You can go to the website. online and having trouble doing this, just put in the chat and we'll try to help you. If you're not getting to the RFA, if you're not able to download, whatever. Oh, I have, so I've had exact same question question a couple of times, and I think I need to clarify. So those goals we talked about, like exploration and so forth, those are types of grants, but they're funded under the different topics. Okay, so your program officer is by topic, and then you can apply to that topic as what type of grant you're working. Okay, so look for the topics first, and then maybe I should change the way I present that. I should talk about the topics first, and then the types of grants. Okay, time's up. So how did that go? Were you able to find your program officer? We're still working here. So one thing I should probably have shown you, and I'm going to do that right now, is, oh, actually, let's find our RFA. And again, you don't have to be looking at the RFA, but you want to read it for example. Okay, so let's say our topic is okay. Our topic is early learning programs and policy. Okay, and we click here. Okay, we get that takes us to the program came on their website. Okay, and then we're saying, well, I'm not sure if I did, or and I can look. Okay, what has been funded recently? Okay, so let's look at 2021. Okay, here it's showing me what's been funded out of this particular topic, right? And then when I see something, I can say, well, that looks similar to what I'm interested in. Okay, and longitudinal development from K to high school is instructed by Kobe. Okay, so I'm gonna look that up. I clicked on that. Now I can read much more. It's telling me the abstract of it, what the project activity is going to be, what the products, the sampling, intervention, research methods, telling me a lot here. Okay, and so this is again a way to kind of get to know your topic better, understand what their expertise are, and then also find people that might be able to apply because they've been funded out of that. The thing they have questions based on their this exercise. How many of you found your program officer? Raise your hand. Right? Okay, okay. Yeah. So, and again, it's not the only place to look, but it's a good example of the process. So you may not, you may decide you want to apply to a different program like this other we talked about before we started talking about all this particular RFA. And look to see what has been funded, the grant, funded grants, search links that I gave you earlier on. You can start to see what sort of things have been funded in the past. Any questions before we move on? Okay. We are going to take a break in about 15 minutes. Okay. So, all right. So we've been talking about all that stuff to understand, kind of your particular part of Department of Education. How do you understand what they're looking for, the types of projects, the categories, all the funding opportunities, all that stuff. Now let's talk more about you, right? What is it you want to do? How do you start to outline the project you have in mind? Okay. So you have an idea, usually on your line of research, your line of scholarship, and you translate that idea into a project that is the funding opportunity, right? So you have decided, okay, this exploration project is going to go to early literacy program. Okay, I know what they're looking for now. I got to start to find my project based on what I want to do. And well, I didn't want to, but I know how much money I can ask for. I know what kind of outputs they expect, what the products are that they expect. They're talking a lot about statistical analysis and about that. How am I going to do that? So now I'm starting to flesh out my ideas. Okay. So think about what are my objectives? What am I trying to do? How do they contribute to my goals? Right. So what am I trying to do in terms of my own research agenda? What's the scope? Is it appropriate? So for your project, $2 million, whatever, right? Do I have the required resources? Do I need collaborators? Almost always, as a project, you need collaborators. So usually it's a team. So think about what other researchers on board, what their expertise is. what, depending on their project. So all of this is part of starting to really flesh out your project in a way that then will make you talk to the program officer, have a substantive conversation with them, and also it will be to write your proposal. And then make sure that as you put your project in the requirements of the program for funding opportunity targeting. And you do think you have enough of a track record on the topic to be competitive when you're right. And sometimes you can decide, maybe a little more the pilots and first maybe I can publicly put out on them before we can be competitive. That's totally fine. That's part of the process. Yourself to write a strong proposal. Okay. So think about what is your project story and exactly how to most of the frame it depends a lot on the kind of project you have in mind, but clear, kind of generically, we talked about what the goal, what you're trying to accomplish, how the world is different, what are we going to know after this project that we don't know now. What's the knowledge? Do I have my rationale? Do I have a theory of change? What are what's underlying theoretical foundation of this? Do I answer questions or hypotheses? Then what's my approach, right? And the farther along you get on that, kind of more applied spectrum, and have more and more detailed from the approach side. Okay, and then your significance, what are your outcomes? Those line up with the type of branch you're proposing. Okay. For instance, so backing up, and we're not talking so much about IDS now, but we talked about some of the other parts of Department of Education. This is where you may be talking more about rationale and approach. A lot of times, logic models are expected. You probably all know about logic models, so I won't belabor this, but that can be good not only, a lot of times they're required a lot of proposal, but also great, planning. Just another example of logic model. Activity out the short-term outcomes, long-term outcomes. They're more typical or again farther along that more applied part of the spectrum versus the fundamental more important. All right, so the value of the logic model, it provides common language for members. It provides a framework for planning, implementing, and evaluating your program. It showcases connections between the program components, so a bunch of different things, how they all fit together. Provides data. Oh, they're not there. Are they talking about that? Sorry. Not here. So what? Okay, it's still not here. Get my question. So you know what?
Can you hear on the regular microphone? Oh, okay. So we can hear now. Or we're gonna switch back over to the other one.
All right.
We're gonna take about a 10-minute break early. We have a break schedule coming up, so we're gonna go ahead and take it a little bit early and try and figure out why the microphone is no longer working. Thank you.
Oh, there. Okay, so. Well,
So you want me to unmute?
Test. Is it coming across your computer or no? Test. See, you're hearing us? Test. Yes. 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 Yes.
Yeah.
Why there's no connected, but if I were to guess, it just didn't automatically connect to it when we turned the mic back on. Something like that, yes, sir. Testing 1 2, testing 1 2. One, two, testing 1 2.
I'll just take the microphone off during exercise and keep it on and not turned off.
Whatever works for you best is what we are. Testing 1 2 is something that our Zoom audience can hear. The first time was good, so we're gonna. First one was that microphone. 1 2, testing 1 2 for Zoom audience.
We can hear you. And
Thank you very much.
On.
We're gonna try and just leave it on.
Okay.
To try to that happen. I'm not sure why it didn't auto reconnect. Probably just like that setting.
Okay.
But yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
If you need to take a break, I just
Okay. I'll just check it off and leave it here. So, okay. So yeah, the problem was I turned it off when during the exercise, and then when I turned it back on, it didn't reconnect for whatever reason.
How use them just in case that's happening again.
Okay.
Of course, we're still having to come back up. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, you're gonna hit echo canceling again. If you need something, we're still happy to love.
Yeah, that would be great if we can do it. Okay. For y'all on Zoom, we still have about 4 minutes before for our break. So. Yeah. Yeah. other, with policymakers, it can be a really good way for them to understand very quickly what what you're doing, where you are in the project, and what the results have been so far. Oops. There we go. Okay. All right. One thing too is remember, you may already have data from your pilot study, from other work you've done, so that can, that can help leverage your logic model and help you, kind of know, kind of where to go from there. Okay. And then, as I mentioned, this is really helpful for aligning the data you're collecting with the measurements you're going to make. Okay, in order to assess the efficacy of your intervention or the success of your program. People generally, I see it from left to right, where you say, okay, these are the resources we have. This is what we're trying to do, and so forth. And then these are our outcomes. But you can go right to left, right? We want these specific outcomes. In order to do that, we need to do these kinds of, meet these kind of goals, and then we have these kind of interventions and so forth. So again, it can be a great thinking tool. Okay, so just as resources, so your IES webinars, there's a link there. Frequently asked questions about logic models, Kellogg Foundation Logic Model Guide, University of Wisconsin, so forth. Okay. Also, you can see a lot of times they're asking for a theory of change. So sometimes those are considered the same thing. I kind of, a lot of times they may be the same thing, but a lot of times you'll see a theory change is more theoretically based. And this is again about what is it you're trying to modify in order to get specific outcomes. What's the logic of that, right? So if you are trying to impact particular factors, you have a targeted intervention, you're targeting those factors. Why are you doing that? How are you going to determine whether you've been successful, and then what outcomes are you going to measure? All right, so as you're thinking about your objectives and aims, okay, make sure that you are clear about what you are actually trying to do, okay, and that those are tied to research questions or hypotheses or your theory of change, right? So again, this is all about developing that story we were talking about, that you're going to, kind of provide the outline of the logic behind your project. And, you want to be careful about being rigorous. Remember, it's all about rigor for Department of Education, right? And having, and being focused. Don't try to have too many objectives. All right, and then just remember, depending on the funding opportunity, they may be looking for theory, they may be looking for an evidence-based strategy, rigorous statistical methods. Again, make sure you understand what is it, that particular funding opportunity, that particular goal that you're applying to, what are they looking for in the context of the topic you're proposing to research. Okay, so now I have an exercise for you. So I think several of you, who has a project in mind? Several of you raised your hand. Okay, so those, you saw who raised their hands. Like everybody else, so those of you who have a project, I'd like you to stand up, move to one side of the room, and then I'd like everybody else to, you're going to be the program officer, so I would like you to kind of pair up with them. If we have, I'm not sure we have a one-to-one correlation, so may have more than one program officer. All right, and what I'd like is for those of you with the project to describe that project to your program officer. Okay, so thinking of what we were just talking about, what is the need of motivation? What are your goals? What are you trying to learn? Generally, how are you going to do it? What's going to come out of it? Okay, so what you want is quick, high-level discussion, not spending, an hour giving all the background. So that's the challenge, right? Because a lot of times when you're talking to a program officer, you only have 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, so you need to make sure that you can describe your project at a high level. And obviously this is going to be just maybe the first try at this. You have to practice, and then you allow them to ask you questions. Okay. Anybody have any questions about this exercise? Those of you on Zoom, we have a We have breakout, 3 breakout rooms. So I'd like you to just choose the breakout room. If you have a project, you can describe that to the other people in your breakout room, and they can listen and ask you questions. Okay. If you don't have a project, you get to be a program officer. That's even more fun, right? So you get to ask questions. That's why I didn't tell you why I asked. All right. So those of you with projects, if you could just stand up so everybody knows who you are. Oh, you're all together. You all have one project. Oh, that's even easier. Okay. So everybody else can come and gather around, and we're going to hear about their project. Okay. So just you can leave your computer and everything and just come.
Everybody join room one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean, a project in mind, right? Not that you have one funded, what a project in mind. Okay. Yeah, if you don't mind, if you don't mind doing that. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, we're going to mute the Zoom people so they can talk to each other. Yeah. I'll give them I don't want to say anything of any value until they show up. So I'll be quiet.
I said 1 minute and people just kept right on going and then it was like, my got cut off. Now I'm done.
Oh, that's a good idea. And actually having some structure to share your ideas.
The right side of the problem. If you get too many people, there's too many people. You can't deal with it. And we do host. As soon as you get academics talking, you guys I'll start figuring out shared interest real quick. One year that we were in one big room, we had posters all
what happens in the classroom is not what they see out there. So with the mixed reality simulation, we hope we can better get these students well prepared.
We're just waiting for the breakout rooms to close down. Okay, so they're okay. So welcome back, everybody in the breakout room. Does anybody in the breakout room have any questions or anything they want to share? You can unmute yourself if you'd like. So how many of you have talked to a program officer before? Anybody? Okay, so that is really a key thing to be, now obviously if it's a big programmatic project like what we're talking about, they'll have webinars, they'll have all these other things, and they don't necessarily expect to talk to you one-on-one. But for these programs, particularly the research-focused programs that we've been talking about, that IES funds, it's really key to talk to that program officer. So as Corey was saying, write up something similar to what I was just showing you, where you have, kind of your goals, what your questions are you're trying to answer, an outline of your approach, what's going to come out of it. And, write that up in a few sentences for each thing. You'll end up with half a page or a page, put that in an email to the program officer. Ask if there's a time you can talk to them. Say, I'm interested in, applying to your program, an exploratory project. Is there a time I can talk to you? Below is a description of, of my idea. And that way that gives them time to read through and kind of think about it a little bit. Then you can set up a Zoom appointment, and then hopefully you can describe your idea pretty briefly, and they can give you feedback. And again, a lot of these program officers at IES are willing to read drafts of your proposal. So that's hugely helpful, because they can really go in and say, oh, you need to talk about this more, you didn't discuss that. So that can be part of it. Don't send them a draft unless they've volunteered to review your drafts, but many of them are willing to do that. So as you're having that conversation, you can always ask about that. Anybody have any questions about talking to the program officer? All right, so now let's talk about writing. So, writing is almost seems like an afterthought when you think about all the other things you have to do, but obviously this is all leading up to making it easier for you to write your proposal, because now you know what is your funder looking for, what kind of arguments do you need to make, what questions do you need to answer, and you've thought through what your project is going to be about. So let's just kind of back up a little bit and think about grantsmanship and things that you need to keep in mind. Okay, biggest thing, and again, I said I work with a lot with early career faculty, and you see the mistakes they make a lot, and one of the big ones is they write a proposal as if it were a journal article. Remember, a grant proposal is not a journal article, okay? So when you think about, okay, that, journal article reader, what if somebody was like, oh yes, I've been wanting to read this article all day. Now it's nice, I got my kids to bed and I'm going to sit down and read this article. I'm going to kind of want to learn more about this topic because it's something I'm interested in, probably in my field, right? And I'm going to read that and just to learn, right? And then I'm going to go to bed. That's not your reviewer. Your reviewer is, oh my God, it's 10 o'clock at night. I've been assigned 15 proposals to read. I have 3 days before the panel meets. I haven't done anything. I'm reading 5 proposals tonight, no matter what. Okay, this first proposal, I'm going to read it. I'm going to get through it. I'm going to fill out my form. I'm going to go to the next one. I don't really care about this topic. It's not even something I'm interested in, right? That is who your audience is. Very different audience, right? Also, when you're writing a grant proposal, it's all about promises, right? You give me this money and I will do these things. I haven't done them yet. Obviously you talk about what you've already done that kind of sets the stage, but it's all promises. So that reviewer is reading you to judge you, right? Can this person do this? Is this worth doing? Your journal article is all about stuff you've already done, right? So again, it's a very different purpose, a different situation. So it's you need to write in a different style. Okay, so don't fall back on journal article style. And it's very easy to do that because that's what we've all been trained to do, is write journal articles. So we'll talk more about this, okay? So one of the first thing is never make your reviewer think, okay? Tell them what to think. What is your argument, okay? Why is this significant? What kind of outcomes is this gonna have? What is your argument for how what you're doing is different from what others have done? Why is it that your team is qualified? State what your arguments are and then back them up. Don't, kind of go through and discuss all the stuff in detail and expect them to kind of come up with what your argument is to answer the review criteria, okay? So think about what is each review criterion that you have to, that reviewer is going to have in a sheet, like a review sheet that they're going to filling out. And then what are your arguments for how your project and your team meets those review criteria? Okay, and state those explicitly. Don't let it get buried in all this sea of discussion. State really clearly, this is why this is significant. This is why this is going to make a difference. Okay, so looking at the IES as the example we've been using. Okay. So they really, your proposals are all, significance, research plan, personnel, resources, and then there's dissemination is another requirement. So these review criteria kind of list what kind of in general terms. Now they're going to be more specific for the particular topic and the particular goal that you're addressing, but they're asking significance. Does the applicant provide a compelling rationale for the significance of the project as defined in the significance section for the goal under which the applicant is submitting the proposal? So if it's an exploration goal, right, as we were talking about, then did you make a rationale and was it clear, right? Does the applicant meet the requirements described in the methodological requirements section? So again, you have to look and see what are the requirements for your particular goal in the methods section, right? Your personnel, is everybody well qualified? All this kinds of stuff. So again, use this as kind of a way to make sure, am I making those arguments really clearly? Okay. And then make your proposal easy to understand and easy to read for somebody who may not be an expert in your particular subfield. Okay, so figures, flow charts, tables, bullet lists. If you're going to have a bunch of different, different populations, your target populations you're testing, and you have a bunch of different, different activities and interventions, and you got these malleable factors, and you got this other stuff. Try to make a table or something that will make it easy for people to see how it all fits together. Again, logic model will help. And then you may also have to talk about, if you're talking about numbers and statistics and that, what these folks are going to be in this condition, this population is going to be in another condition. If you just put it all in text, very hard to follow. So that's where things like tables can be super helpful. Headings and subheadings. Okay, so they're telling you, and we'll talk about, they tell you the main sections you have to have, but under those have clear subheadings to help people find the information they need. Okay, if you have a main point, if you're addressing a review criterion explicitly, underline, bold, italics can help people find that. You make it easy for your reviewer because remember, they're filling out a review sheet. Again, if you were backing up, getting out of IES and talking about these other more programmatic projects and proposals to other parts of the Department of Education, then you definitely want to follow exactly what they're asking for and put in exactly in the order they're asking for things, and make sure that the reviewer can easily find everything because they're following that checklist. So it's even more important to be very structured and be very responsive to the solicitation. Okay. Avoid cognitive taxes. So remember that poor reviewer might be reading your proposal at 3 in the morning after they've already read the 4 other ones. And so their poor IQs are not doing great at this point, right? They're probably getting pretty tired. So you don't want to do things like, having acronyms, where people have to, in their mind, translate the acronym. Is it really important to make an acronym out of something, or can you just say it? If it's something you use over and over again, then an acronym's fine. But if you find yourself in a sentence that you have multiple acronyms, then that poor reviewer is going to have to translate that in their mind, and it's a cognitive tax. Same thing with writing style. Be really careful about these big, long sentences with lots of dependent clauses and the main idea at the end of the sentence, because the reviewer may be reading this at 3 in the morning. They're tired. If they don't, they read a sentence like that and they don't understand it. A lot of times they'll just keep reading. They'll start skimming. Okay, so that's kind of a big picture. So let's talk about writing your proposal step by step. Okay. So for IES, we're just taking IES as an example here. So for IES proposal components, generally, they have the SF424 forms, which is, for federal proposals. They require 1-page abstract, typically a 22-page single-space narrative. There may be appendices, bibliographies, references, and so forth. Okay, we're going to focus on the narrative. Okay, so just as an example, and this is all, if you're responding to the RFA we were just talking about, then they will tell you in there exactly what they want in each of these sections. But generally, they require significance. So why is this important? Research plan, how will you accomplish your aims? Personnel, why is your team qualified? Resources, do you have the resources required to succeed? So those are the big sections you have in that 22-page narrative, okay? Now within those, there's all kinds of guidance, and you will find that in your RFA. It will depend on the topic, it will depend on the goal, right? So exploratory and so forth, right? So if you have to kind of look and see what are the expectations, and again, this is really important to understand what is it that reviewer is being told to evaluate. Okay. Oh, and then you may be results of person. Okay. So look at the RFA. I'm going to summarize some of this for one example, but they really go into a lot of detail by goal, like what is it you need to have, and then again, Make sure you filter it through the topic that you're applying. Okay, so backing up a little before we go into what they're asking for in each section, you want to think about the structure of your sections. Okay, so this is again a place where you want to be really careful not to fall back into journal article style. Okay, so journal article style, let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the, let's talk about the problem. Let's talk about the literature. We'll keep adding on. And then finally we get to, this is what we're going to do. And this is what's going to come out of it. Okay, there's a tendency to step through and give all the background first. But a reviewer reading this at 2 in the morning is not going to be happy with that, right? You're going to start, if they read through the first couple of pages, they have no idea what you're going to do, then they're usually going to start skimming. Okay, so instead of doing that, you want to, in each section, so significance and so forth, right? You want to give the outline of the elephant. What are your main ideas? Then start filling in, right? Now let's go into all the details. And even at the paragraph level, rather than going through a lot of background and giving the conclusion, okay, someone, when you're talking about the literature, what other people have done to address this problem or what the theory is, you can go through so-and-so did this, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did that. Therefore, this shows that. Instead, put it up front. A number of researchers have found that. Now, specifically, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did that. This is just proposal style. It is a way for reviewers to quickly grasp what you're saying at 2 in the morning, and then they can read the detail versus making them read through a big long paragraph discussing all the literature and then get to the conclusion at the bottom. Same thing if you've done a pilot study, you want to talk about that. State your conclusions from the pilot. What does that pilot study show? We have shown feasibility of X. Then give the details. Don't start with, we recruited X number of students and we did this and we did that and 2 pages later, okay, this shows that. Put it up front. The Department of Defense has an acronym for this. They call it BLUF, bottom line up front. Right? So put your conclusions first, then fill in. Give the big picture first, then fill in. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the sections. And this is, I'm just giving you what they're telling you in the RFA that they want in here. And there's a lot more detail in the RFA. Well, there's no sense of me reading the RFA to you, but this is an example this is for the development and innovation goal. Okay, so significance. Why is it important to develop this program, practice, or policy? Right? Why is it likely to be affordable and feasible? Right? So again, affordability keeps coming in. And then what are the core features of the program, practice, or policy, including its essential practices and structural elements. Okay, and then they give you more resources on how to describe that. Okay, and then they have, so they tell you this is what we want, and then this is what they tell you. Okay, in order to be really competitive, this is kind of examples of what the level of detail we need. Okay, so describe what the challenge is and the theoretical empirical rationale. So we were talking about that before. The program practice or policy you propose to develop or refine, the theory of change that will guide your development and testing, how this will benefit historically underserved learners, any partnerships with education agencies, and if proposing to further develop a program, policy, or practice, then you want to discuss what's already been done, right? So if you're saying, okay, we're going to take this and now go to the next step, you need to describe what's already been done. Now, organizing all this, again, this is where giving that big overview first, then going into the details of these things will really help you to be able to, help that reviewer to follow your argument. Okay. Big thing though, and this is for this particular goal, is to say what your research questions and aims are. Yes. So I think so the question was, sorry. So the question was, in his field, there are different theories of change in models. So should you use one that reviewers are likely to know and be familiar with, or should you use one that is more, aligned with what you have in mind for your project? So I would say if you're using an innovative model, a new model, that could be a feature, not a bug, right? You can talk about how this is really innovative and new, but you need to defend it, right? So give a lot of citations, talk about why it's justified. Then you can go on from there. And to me, that makes sense. Now, there are always political and disciplinary considerations. So sometimes some models are in fashion and others are not. If you know your field, and talking to the program officer can help you with that. So sometimes it's like, well, nobody really buys this model, and that just depends on your discipline and what's going on in your discipline, whether or not that's an issue. But in general, if you have something innovative, I think it shows, and you justify it. You don't want to just throw it out there and not justify it. But if it shows that you're on, you have new ideas and you're at the leading edge of your field, you're not just using the same old model. So I think in general, it can be a really good idea, but again, you have to show your work. Anybody else? Anybody else have any questions about that? Great. Okay, wonderful. That's perfect. Well, I'll be ready in 11. Oh, you're the panelist. Great. Okay. We expected you to be virtual, so it's great to. No, that's wonderful. Get a kolache. You couldn't get one if you were virtual. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so another thing to keep in mind is that your proposal is one in a stack of proposals that are going to the same program, right? So you need to think about how can you make your proposal stand out from that first page. Right? Really think about, that reviewer is going through proposal after proposal. And, there are going to be a lot of common features because you're responding to the same funding opportunity. It may be you're responding to the same topic, right? And so you need to very quickly say what's different about what you're doing. So, that why you should be funded versus all the other ones that are in that stack that reviewers is looking at, okay? So that means you really need to get a quick start when you're on page 1 of your narrative. Don't start with a big generic introduction about why we need better literacy, why we, what problems with underserved learners and so forth. That's could fit in any proposal. Instead, talk about what's new, what are you doing that's your great idea, and grab your reviewer. Because if you start with that generic introduction, the reviewer is just going to get more and more bored until you get to the bottom of page 3 and you talk about what your new idea is. Instead, put it up front. Right? And then talk about everything in the context of that great idea, because that's the way you grab that reviewer and get them excited. If it's important, it should be on the first page. Not in terms of detail, again, outline of the elephant, not all the detail, but give them the big picture. Why is it they should want to fund you compared to the other ones in that stack? Okay. So a lot of times, because you're going to do something other people haven't done before. So your goals are what people put at the top, your objectives, your aims. Could be that you have an entirely new approach, right? State that. Don't wait until you get to the methodology section to tell them that. You'll go into detail in the methodology section, but state, this is why we can make a difference here. You have a problem you're addressing other people haven't addressed. You have a new tool, a new resource, an unusual team, whatever it is. State that on page 1. Okay, don't let that get buried at the bottom of page 4. All right, so that next section they ask for is the research plan. So this is where a lot of times you can lose the reviewer, right? You've done a great job with significance, talking about your theory of change, talking about your, the rationale, talking about what you're trying to do. And yet when it comes to actually how are you going to do it, there's not enough detail. And if the reviewers feel like they can't understand how you're actually going to accomplish your aims, they're not going to fund you. They want enough detail so they can judge whether you've really thought things through. And then, kind of toggling back to what we were talking about, those who are programmatic grants, that it's all about the logistics. It's huge. That's the challenge, because reviewers are looking for how can this project fail? You have to convince them this is worth doing first. but then they're going to be looking for how could it fail? And if it's logistically complex, you're going to need to be very clear how you're doing things, and you can describe to them step by step how you're going to accomplish your aims. Okay. So guidance from the RFA for the development and innovation goal is, you have to talk about your sample and setting, your research design and methods, your measures and data analysis plans, your cost plan analysis plan, your timeline. And then within each of those, they give you all kinds of guidance on how to do those, what kind of level of detail. But again, think about where are the challenges going to be in your project? It could be measures, maybe statistical analysis methods. Maybe you need to give them a lot more detail on that. Maybe it has to do with recruiting your study subjects. It could be, on your research design. Really think through what the reviewer is going to be concerned about and be sure to give them plenty of detail. This is where a lot of times people will, kind of fail with the reviewers. The reviewers will be on board until they get to a section. They're like, boy, they just glossed over this thing. I don't think they really have thought this through. And then they won't be comfortable, reviewing you well. Okay. So, advice from IES, to talk about they like mixed methods for this goal, iterative process, and then they give you all kinds of detail about what they're looking for. So be sure and really take that seriously, because they are trying to give you guidance of what they need you to address. So the challenge a lot of times is fitting it all in, because it's a lot of information. I think, when you are talking about your work plan, really think step by step, how am I going to do this? Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, try to organize it in a way that's easy for somebody reading through your proposal once to follow how you're going to do things, okay? Common mistakes people make is basically, having a miracle occurs here plan, right? We're going to get to this point, and then, we're going to be able to recruit these study participants, but we're not telling you how. They're suddenly going to show up, right? We're going to put flyers out and everybody's going to show up, or we're going to, that kind of thing, right? Skating over logistically difficult tasks. So where are you going to put it? How are you going to actually do this? This intervention, you're going to do this over a whole summer, but how are you going to do that, right? All that kind of stuff. Failing to acknowledge risk. So attrition, various, problems with your analysis, all that kind of stuff. You want to talk about those things. If it's risky, that can be okay if you talk about how you're going to mitigate that risk, if you have a workaround. But if you don't acknowledge that something's risky, then reviewers think you don't realize it, and then that's going to be a red flag for them. Okay. Other common mistakes in this section: a little rambling discussion of possible approaches, not really being organized, and then the reviewers don't understand how you're doing it. Lack of alignment of your goals with the objectives, and then too much or too little detail. So think about, if I were, funded tomorrow, what would I need to do first? What would I need to do next? What are the highest risk tasks? What depends on what else? And that way you can really, kind of describe this in detail. And then describe your team, why you have the various members on the team, who's responsible for what, how are you going to make sure that everybody stays on task? Resources, any resources you need, access within your institution and then outside your institution. Okay. And then just to finish up, okay, how does the Department of Education review your application? We've been talking about this already. You have a panel of expert reviewers. There usually will be assigned particular proposals. They'll fill out a review sheet. And there's more detail here. This is that they have standing review panels for IES, okay? And you can look up the list of peer reviewers on those panels, although it's a little bit old. It's like from 2022 is what they have up now, but that can be super helpful. I saw some people in Texas A&M on there, okay? Oops, that's insane, okay? Sorry, went the wrong way here. Okay, so big thing is, if you don't get funded, read your reviews, learn from them, talk to your program officer, and then think about how usually first time you put in a proposal, it's not going to get funded. So it's a question of taking in, they're trying to tell you how to make the proposal better, and then you can revise it and resubmit. Okay. Now we have a panel. I'm running out to finish that up really fast because we have a panel, and so we have Dr. Vijay Kumar, who is online, and Dr. Watkins, who is here in person. And so can I invite you to come up, and then I'll let Corey figure out how do we do this all on Zoom. And what I want to do is just ask a few questions and have you introduce yourself and ask a few questions, and then we'll open it up to everybody. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so I'll let you pull up the Zoom. Let me get out of here. Yes.
I remember.
Let me give that. Let me just give.
Having trouble clicking
Yeah.
it on.
Thank you for
So, I'm going to stop sharing. All right. Okay.
Dr. Kay, can you say hi?
Oh, here I have her down as you.
He's the last
Oh.
one. Okay, can you say hi? Can you hear us?
Hi,
Ah, there she is. How are you doing? Thank
good,
you.
how are you?
So I wanted to just ask you all, Dr. Vijay Kumar, I'm going to ask you first, and then we'll go on to Dr. Watkins about just like what your background is with education funding, and sort of what was your journey to getting funding. So I'll ask.
All
you.
right, well, thanks for inviting me. My journey actually was quite interesting because I got started kind of in an apprenticeship learning style where I was the co-PI to Bonnie Meyer in our first grant in 2000. And it just was happenstance that I happened to have lunch with her and she got a rejection letter and she was telling me about it. And she goes, well, they rejected me because they said it wasn't feasible. And I said, well, I could build you a software for that. And she goes, you think? And I'm like, yeah, I know. And I had no clue what I was getting into, but I said, sure, why not? And so she said, well, here's the reviews that they sent back. Let's address the reviews and submit it. And sure enough, they funded it in 2001. And then we actually built the software to deliver the professional development and also to provide instruction to children. And this was our first IES grant. It was called the Intelligent Tutoring System for the Structure Strategy, ITSS. And that's the one that now has sustained over $80 million in funding throughout my time for the last 23 years. And not only has it been featured in the What Works Clearinghouse, but because of the rigor and approach we took to conducting the research effectively, we are featured in the What Works Clearinghouse, on US News and World Report, on the Johns Hopkins website for powerful technologies, and so on. But because of those accolades and those rigorous research studies, then we were eligible to get the EIR grants from the other part of the US Department of Education, and that one, and the SEED grant, SEED for 10 million, the EIR for 15 million. And currently we are doing the EIR for 15 million with 64 schools across the country. And we just got that award in 2021. And now we are in the second year of that project. So I've been very blessed, but I've also been very systematic, and I've been very, very careful to be responsive to the taxpayer dollars that come in. And I've always done exactly what we said we would do. And that's the reason why we keep getting funded over and over and over again. And I delivered a keynote for the IESPI meeting in May of 2023, because we were the only team in their entire portfolio of billions of dollars that actually had no pandemic-related declines in literacy when they worked with us. So it was a really hallmark moment for us and for them to acknowledge that the money that they've given, everybody was running around complaining about pandemic declines, and we had none. We had schools that went from 50% pass rates to 90% pass rates. We had 26 schools that had 100% pass rates, using the technologies and the tools and the professional development, all of it funded by the US Department of Education. So,
Okay, great. Well, I'll ask Dr. Watkins, and we'll come back to you for more details on how you do that. So,
Well, so that's going to be tough to follow. I'm not quite that experienced, but my background is in training grants, specifically OSEP, so Office of Special Education Programs. I first became familiar with it as a doc student myself, and then at my former institution was involved in an OSEP grant focusing on increasing the number of rural educators to improving outcomes for students with disabilities in rural areas. And then currently at A&M, we have a brand new one. So Dr. Arabelli's on the call. She's a co-PI focused on training culturally and linguistically diverse educators to improve outcomes for CLD students in this region. For those of you who have your research, training, and service are all very closely intertwined. These are training grants are great opportunities for you. Especially, I know it's focused on training students, but we do get research out of it as well. So yeah, I've been here just a couple months and the team was so helpful in just preparing my materials and giving me wonderful feedback. So yeah, if you are newer to the grant writing experience like I am, definitely utilize the resources here. They are fabulous.
So just to follow up on that, did you have any experience of putting in a proposal and having it declined? Have you done that?
Yes. So I have about a 50% success rate right now. So
that's really good.
My first application through A&M was successful, but I have submitted others, and then we've revised it twice before getting funding. So yeah, it's very important to stick with it, not give up after that first rejection or second.
So Kay, have you had any proposals declined? It sounds like you've been very successful. Maybe you've had a charmed life here, but have you had any declined proposals?
Oh, fantastic question, because I have never ever gotten a grant on the first round. I've always, I think, except for 2 that were outright rejected, and I decided not to resubmit. I've had plenty of outright rejections, but I'll say that out of the 18 grants that I have been awarded, none of them were ever awarded on the first round. And the most recent grant, the PRISM one, actually was awarded after 4 resubmissions. And I was absolutely bound and determined that I'm just going to get that, because I really wanted to work with Jennifer Cromley up in Illinois, and I wasn't going to give in to those reviewers. I just kept going back at it. But usually after 2 rounds, if they'll say no, I just like, you know what, forget this. So yeah, it's not an easy thing, and I think that people really need to buckle up and just, you know, if you believe in what you're doing, then you want to get this funded, right? I mean, I think that's the moral of the story, is that I have never had anything funded in the first round, just upfront.
So, Dr. Watkins, what did you learn from your declined proposals? I mean, was there anything that you felt like, okay, is something I now know.
Well, the reviewer feedback was super helpful. I learned to highlight the things that I thought my first round maybe I didn't pay enough attention to. So making sure on subsequent revisions, really focusing in on that. Yeah, it's the feedback you get is generally very helpful in preparing your next mission.
And Kay, did you have anything that you, in particular, that you felt like, okay, this was really helpful in terms of the reviews? Any feedback you got that improved your projects?
I would say that I'm not going to answer that part of the question. I'm just going to be politically correct. I think if you want to get your grant funded, it is very imperative that you address the reviewer comments, however bizarre they might be. And because it's a standing review panel and the same people are going to look at it again, and they give you three, I don't know, the last one I think was 2 pages or 3 pages to respond to the reviewer comments. So that's additional space in the grant proposal process. And so you take advantage of it and you do what they tell you to do. One of the examples is that at one point, a few years ago, I could tell which review panelist it was because they just kept on saying that you have not included people like this on your panel, and therefore you don't have expertise in this. And actually, I wrote a rebuttal to the commissioner because we had plenty of expertise on the team. They just wanted one of their people to be given a consultantship. So I put their person on the consultant list and they funded it because they have nothing to say at that point. So you have to be strategic in responding to their reviews. You have to be, very effusive about it. Well, thank you so much and all that kind of stuff, but just go ahead and address what they said was wrong with it. And I mean, I must say there have been instances where things have gotten better, but just be mindful that when they say, oh, you are missing expertise in this particular niche area, even though that's not what you're going after, what they mean is, hint, 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 I've got a former doc student who needs consulting money, you need to put them on there. So,
Yeah, it's similar to what you do when you're submitting a paper for publication.
Right, exactly.
Address those reviewers' comments and be very appreciative of them and show that you're responsive to them.
And have either of you reviewed for the Department of Education?
I have not, no.
Oh, okay. It looks like you have. What was your?
Yeah, I've reviewed multiple times for multiple agencies, NSF, IES, NIH, been on every one of their review panels. It's interesting in that they do have a good, checklist by which you're supposed to write your comments and feedback. They do have that pre-panel where everybody presents their scores and some of their, simple comments about the proposals. And they assign one person to be the primary person to bring to the panel each proposal that they reviewed or whatever. And then early on, they take the scores and then they don't discuss at panel a certain, threshold of proposals. But they do ask the review panelists whether someone wants to speak on behalf of including that proposal in that panel discussion. And I found one thing I want to mention about those reviewer comments. I'll tell you that if your proposal has been triaged, well, that's IES system. That means it wasn't reviewed at panel. What that means is that the reviews that you get back are actually worthless because they'll say things like, oh, this was great, that was great. And you're like, huh? And then you triaged us because it wasn't discussed at panel. And the people who are doing that preliminary review don't put a lot of effort into that at all. So I must say that the reviews that we got back when you've been triaged have been completely worthless. In those instances, I go back to the program officer and ask them what exactly was discussed about this. Tell us what we can do to improve it. And they do provide useful information. So, yeah.
As a reviewer, are there common mistakes you see people make in proposals that you would, that would provide good advice to somebody who's maybe new to writing grant proposals, things that they should avoid doing?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that lots of people think when they write a proposal, especially the novices, is that this is similar to a publication or a manuscript. So they think that they have to, do a whole lot of explaining of certain things. Whereas the review panel is given very direct guidelines, and there is a section in the RFA that clearly states what criteria will be used to evaluate your proposal. And they clearly tell you what will be responsive to that call. And if you don't follow that order and don't answer those questions, and instead give a whole lot of wonderful information that would have been perfect for a publication, you are going to get really bad scores. And the other thing I've found is that kind of a overemphasis on the first half of the proposal, leaving just like half a page for personnel and a half a page for the resources, is just a little disastrous, because they want to know that you have a group of people around you, because one single person can't do this. They want to know that you have expertise for budget. They want to know you've got expertise on theory and statistical analysis. And they want to know that you have all the resources at the university. So you want to make sure that as you're writing it, don't just write, like a 22-page limit, like 21 pages of, significance and research design, and leave a half a page for, so.
Dr. Watson, what advice would you give to somebody who is totally new to grant? Like, how to get started? Because you've been able to get
start early. I know sometimes the call comes out and it's a very quick turnaround, but from year to year, there's slight variations, but you kind of have an idea what to expect. So start planning early, start talking to your team early. I would suggest, not waiting to have your everything ready to go right before submission, but taking time to, give it to the REO team to give feedback. That's actually super helpful. They go beyond just kind of ticking boxes to make sure you have everything, but they actually give substantial feedback on the content of what you're going to submit. Yeah, just plan ahead and be ready. Be ready to go once that call comes out.
All right, and Dr. Wijakumar, what would your advice be to somebody who's totally new, trying to get started as a researcher and getting funding? How should they get started? A little daunting.
I think that, what was successful for me, it just was a great experience for me to be co-PI with someone else who really knew what they were doing and had previous OSEP grants, and I think it was called OERI or something like that. But that's helpful to partner with someone else who has got grants. I would really encourage people to do that. The second thing is make sure that the work you are doing currently is published in very, very good journals and has gone through rigorous review processes, so that you can build on that. That is the leg that gives you a leg up to stand on, and make sure that your intervention is extremely well thought out. And again, if you've got a good team that can, critique it and refine it and things like that, it helps you to think through these things before you come to the review panel. You must have wonderful, goals for the project. You must have a good research design for the project. And all of those start with something that you have done that is, that has been through a good peer review process and published in good journals.
Yeah, I would second that as being co-PI. To start is a really great way to get an introduction to this whole process and getting kind of your feet wet before you venture out as PI. IES also has great early career programs. So they actually age out of it pretty quickly. But if you're new, making sure that you're not waiting maybe until their last year of eligibility to submit, so that you can have probably multiple opportunities to submit and then have more likelihood of funding that way.
All right, so I've asked enough questions. Let me open it up to the audience. Does anybody have any questions they'd like? Yeah.
I have a question. Can I ask?
Okay, so
Hello.
the question was, how does one become a reviewer for one of these agencies? Dr. Wijakumar, do you have a suggestion?
Well, they do at some of these meetings, they do request people to send their vita and things like that. And then they also look, I think, for people who have previous funding. They also look to see who has published in some of these high impact journals. The US Department of Education, Institute of Education Sciences funded Society for the Research in Educational Effectiveness. SRE is the name of the organization, and it is run by Larry Hedges. If you all have done any statistics, you've heard of the Hedges, all the statistical methods. So Larry Hedges and a great team run that. And so if you go to that conference, you will see and hear from people who are very closely tied to these grant funding, either as people who have received grants on review panels and who are seeking to be on review panels. So you have to have, I mean, most of those people on those review panels have, I don't know, 50, 100 publications in Journal of Ed Psych and Contemporary Ed Psych and all the top tier journals. And on top of that, they have been in the field for quite a while. And they have received multiple grants as well. So.
Question on Zoom?
I have a, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a question. You mentioned that having good publications is, I mean, my understanding is that having good publications in good journals is one step towards applying for grants. But for example, I'm a computer science researcher, and a lot of our research is just innovation. You know, I mean, Python's for free. We can just download the software and we can do whatever we want. So the question is that asking for grants, what should I ask for? For example, I got many Q1 journals in one area of virtual environments, but I know if I want to give the grant, what do I need it for? I mean, yes, conferences and travel, but what else? I mean, I have this software for free that will help me do all the work. So what are the things that I can ask for in a grant? Does that make sense?
Well, if you're going to the Department of Education for funding, they expect you to be doing that work with some children or some adults or some group of humans. And that takes money to have research assistants who go there and do pre-tests and post-tests and establish the efficacy or impact estimates of whatever you are downloading. It's not just a matter of downloading it, it's a matter of having them use it for an extended period of time and establishing whether it's useful or not. And that's what they are willing to fund. This is not NSF. NSF is the one that gives out money for downloading and running something and writing it up. US Department of Ed is very focused on educational outcomes. And so the educational outcomes takes effort. Like our grants require quite a few people to provide professional development to use the software, or teachers to manage how the software is used by the students, and then follow up pre-testing and post-testing and do fidelity observations throughout the year. When you try to start paying personnel for doing those things, then your cost adds up.
Awesome. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So for example, one of the projects that can be is teaching kids how to program. For example, in school, by having, some workshops where we teach kids on how they can learn the concepts of programming. And of course, this can help students get many other skills. But I mean, as a computer science researcher, what's the easiest way, or what's the approach to find researchers from education who can help with this, who can, for example, measure the effectiveness of the workshops and how they work well, etc.?
Well, I think that you would then reach out to some of the departments in the college and inquire, and most department heads are quite happy to send out, if you have a summary written up about what exactly will be taught, whether you're teaching them how to do Python or just, just algorithmic thinking or whatever you're trying to do. And then you would create kind of a description and then share it around. And there may be faculty who are interested in doing those kinds of things. But I can tell you that the US Department of Education, I have not ever seen them fund workshops for people. They want full-blown interventions that are delivered for a whole year or something like that within a school system. I have not seen them fund a workshop. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just going to say, probably want to partner with some colleagues who are experienced in intervention work to test out those programs that you're talking about in a school setting. So somebody who has experience with applied work in that area.
I think that brings up a good point of, you may have a project that you feel is education oriented, but it has to fit what the Department of Education wants to fund. So you really have to be kind of hard-headed about, really looking and seeing what do they want to fund. And as I said at the beginning of the workshop, there are many other places that do fund education research that maybe your project doesn't fit Department of Education, maybe NSF would be the place to go, or maybe foundation. So you may have to look more broadly.
Gotcha. Thank you.
They're also, so Kesha was saying, also, I mean, if you're trying to figure out why you should need money, that's pretty easy to answer that question. We all need money, to support students and indirect costs and all kinds of stuff that are required in order to actually run a project. So, and your time, your students' time, all the other logistical costs, there's plenty, but the project has to fit what the funder wants to fund. So more questions. This is your
Hi,
chance.
this is Ramona Pittman.
Sorry, Ramona, just if you hang for 1 second. I just wanted to tell this gentleman who was asking a question. So there is another group called SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, and there is a guy at IES who handles those workshops. And if you can actually speak with them and see whether some of these computer science innovations can be run through that. So anyway, just wanted to give him some hope. So sorry, Ramona. Yeah.
No problem. Kate, of course, this is Ramona, but can you just talk about how you select evaluators? Because that's what I got dinged on for one of the grants that I had written.
Evaluators are necessary for only some grants, and in certain cases, IES development grants, they don't expect an external evaluator at all. But if you do an efficacy or an effectiveness trial, then they do expect that. How I have selected external evaluators is to go to companies like WestEd, AIR, Mathematica, to some of these bigger names to give me a little bit more clout, so to speak, people who are getting funded by the Department of Ed. And if you look at their funding stream, they are handing out an equal amount of money to those groups as well. So I've kind of opted to go with well-known companies or agencies that are willing to do that. And by the way, even for a small grant, if you include one program officer from WestEd or AIR, they would give you a small contract to be to provide some consulting services to you, for the project. I mean, they're just trying to add a little bit of objectivity to the outcome, so to speak. So that's how I've operated. So
Thank you.
By the way, some people have asked like other university people to serve in that capacity. That has been done too. So
Yeah, so for the training grants, we have evaluators as well. And I've currently a member of the team, the co-PI is the evaluator who has experience in that area. But my earlier submissions, I was deemed on the same thing as well. So that I think that was something that really helped us become successful in my prior submission, is getting someone who had experience in program evaluation be on the team. So that is something that is very important to look for. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? And I'll so just for the people online, so we're having a question in the room. I will repeat it. So hold on just a second. I'll repeat it. Go ahead. So the question was, to what extent do interdisciplinary collaborations across colleges or schools help with funding? So Dr. Wijikumar, did you want to answer that first?
yeah, it's a little complicated because the IES, if you're going after IES especially, they have those program areas that they're covering, and they're also covering specific, I mean, they don't call them those goals anymore, but they're kind of in those general areas. So you have to still work within those confines, if you will. So if you do like social emotional learning, and then you bring in someone from a different area, and if you're doing science, you could have someone else from science and so on. Those are, I think, valued collaborations that work really well. But I can also tell you that many of those review panelists are very education focused. And so when you go a little bit out and go on a limb and maybe hire somebody from health sciences to come help you with something like that, and they don't have the name recognition that someone who has a health education publication record that people on the panel are familiar with. I've had this happen, and it's just very frustrating when you bring in somebody who's really well known in like nutrition, in the nutrition field, but then you bring them here and they're like, who is this person? They don't have anybody who knows anything about nutrition. And I'm like, this is the expert from the nutrition people. Like, just because they haven't published in nutrition education doesn't mean, I mean, there's a whole field out there. Stop acting like, y'all are the be all and the end all. But those are the realities of these kind of collaborations beyond the college, so to speak. Same thing happens with engineering. I've done this where you bring in some engineering colleagues and they're like, who are these people? We don't know these people. I mean, of course they don't say it like that, but
Well, so for the training grants, it's interesting because often the calls are specifically for interdisciplinary collaborations. So maybe it's actually kind of fun because you do have a little more leeway. Of course, you have to focus it on the educational outcomes always, but there are opportunities, more specific opportunities for interdisciplinary collaboration in that respect.
All right. More questions? Yeah. Again, oh, let me just real say, for people online, we have a question in the room. I'll repeat it.
No, OSEP gave us.
I'm sorry. I should.
Oh, sorry.
I forgot. I could hear. I forgot everybody else. So the question was outside IES. So the questioner was saying, she's put in proposals. There's no program officer really that will talk to you once the RFA is out. You don't get reviews back. You get a score, right? But no reviews, or you're not getting anything back. So, that's interesting. So usually I see the scores coming back on some of them, but you worked on programs where there there was no feedback except you didn't get funded. And so question is that, you know, I guess the question is what's with that, huh? So
Yeah, so for the training grants, there are program officers, and I definitely knock on their virtual door often to talk about the proposal before we submitted. And we did get feedback, pretty detailed feedback.
Yeah, and that's outside of IES.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Wijikumar, have you had that experience where you applied to a program where there was no reviews, you got no reviews back if you were declined?
I've never had that happen.
Yeah, I think that is probably just very specific to particularly more programmatic, very programmatic, not research at all. And I think that you see that sometimes where it's like may not even be peer reviewed in that case because they're looking for a particular service, in which case it's almost like they're looking for a contractor, you know, that kind of thing. And that's really a different kind of, a whole different process, really. And it's all to some extent, and I don't know anything about your program at all, but in general, my experience has been a lot of times that there's a lot of networking involved in getting those, right? That it's not just, you know, writing a proposal and being judged on that, on the value, on the merit of the proposal. You've got it. Yeah. So the comment was that there are, you know, some program officers outside IES are not as forthcoming as others. Although I have worked, you know, in Office of Higher Education, that they are really, I mean, the program officers I've dealt with there have been quite helpful. But again, it probably can vary depending on what part of Department of Education you're talking to. And definitely, I think again, if it's there are some funding opportunities where it's considered, well, once the RFA is out, then it's, you know, it's like giving somebody special preference if you answer their questions at that point. So that's a culture difference between different parts of the agency.
And in some sense, it's kind of you know, when you call the program officers, I think it's best if you have a specific set of questions that they can answer about different aspects of your proposal. Do these personnel look appropriate? Is this theory of change, you know, appropriate? Because at the heart of hearts, these program officers are there to encourage more applications. So I have always found them to say, oh, that's fantastic. That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Submit it, submit it. I keep getting calls from people saying, can you submit this proposal? You know, there's a really great call out. Would you want to consider submitting it? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. You know, so people, they are there to encourage. So you also have to take their feedback with a grain of salt, you know, so.
All right, so anybody online have any questions? Any hands right now? Okay, anybody else have any more questions? The question is, are the peer review panels blind? So meaning that the reviewers won't know who is actually proposing?
No,
okay,
they all yeah, they have to review who these people are, and they have to know who you are and what you're doing, and yeah, so there's nothing blind about it. Yes.
Yeah, in fact, they're the opposite. Most grant proposals are the opposite of blind. A big part of it is what is your track record, your expertise, and so forth.
You don't know your although you may be able to guess something. But you don't know your reviewers, though.
Yeah, it's blind the other way. You're right. It's like although you can look up who's on those standing panels, right? You can see who's on those, but you won't know who is reviewing you. And some other agencies, National Science Foundation, it's a big no-no for somebody to come up to you and say, hey, I reviewed your proposal. They're not supposed to say that because it is supposed to be anonymous. NIH, you can look up who's on your panel. So again, depends on the funder. They're all different models. All right, so if no other questions, I want to let our panelists kind of give their final, kind of final wisdom. Dr. Wijakumar, can I ask you first, anything you would like, we haven't covered, or any advice you'd like to give to people who are maybe new to Department of Education that you feel would be helpful to them?
I think that if you believe in what you do, step up and apply for the grant. CERD, I can't say enough about this amazing group of people. I've never, ever been at an institution with this level of good support. I mean, people say they're giving support. So, I mean, we've got, Corey Douglas, we've got Keisha Henry, we've got Ann Savell. I mean, Ann's been my lifeline for all of these proposals. And so we've got some fantastic supports. So, and talk to other people who have grants. We are always eager to get more people involved in these things. The more the merrier. We need more people to do good work in schools. So get involved, come talk to us, and get cracking. The other thing is, don't wait. This, I think, is the best advice I can give to people. People say, oh, you know what? It's not quite there yet. I'll submit it next year. No, you know what? Just send it in and take your licks and get the feedback and improve on it. There is no such thing as a perfect proposal, especially when they write back the nastiest reviews. So send it in, don't wait, and get involved. I mean, the only way to do this is by jumping into the deep end of the pool.
Thank you so much, Dr. Watson.
Yeah, some similar things I'll echo. Use the team here. They really, really are wonderful. I've been blown away about the resources and support that's available at this university. Don't get deflated. There's just so much reflection in this field. It's easy to just say, oh, I wasn't successful, I'm just gonna give up on that project. But use that feedback and you can develop a stronger proposal for next time. Also, something that I think is really important, have a good team that you want to work with, your co-PIs that can really make the journey more difficult or a lot more easy. So yeah, having a good team is very important.
Great, thank you. Well, I really want to thank the panelists for so much for their time and being willing to share their experience. So that's what thank you. All right, and so I will hand it back.
Okay, and so we're good to go. I'd like to thank Lucy for yet another great presentation workshop, giving us all that information. Thank you, Lucy. It's a great resource to have. I will plug our office, which our office seems to have been plugged quite a bit. So we're very appreciative. We love helping people. We try our best, and if we can't find the information, we can help you find who may have it, or at least give you a shoulder to cry on or an ear to listen. And sometimes just bouncing ideas off of each other is something that can be very beneficial for everyone, right? These materials are, once again, there's links in the chat. We have some flash drives. We'll have them in our office if you need to come by and look at it that way as well. And we have the recording, so that will be up in a few days. We also have a recording that's up from NIH website, and we are for our NIH workshop that we gave a couple weeks ago, and we'll distribute that information as well. Otherwise, have a good day, and we come by our office, 428 Harrington, or you can always email us. So, thank you.